All right, so good evening and welcome to the first ever screening of the Guild of Music Supervisors, first film festival ever, first year, first film. And Melissa, your sport to be the guinea pig to do that with your music supervisor Ed Gerrard, who's one of our board members and the New York, and he's actually the first music supervisor ever to win a Grammy. I don't know if you knew that, Melissa.
Wow.
The big shot. And you guys are both New York State residents at this point, living outside the city. You got out of the smart people got out of the city and got out to the burbs a little bit. And so talk about this journey of this film. This is one of the finest films I've seen in the last year. It's got an amazing mix of the political stuff I didn't see coming, which was fantastic. It was a great reveal. And so talk about your relationship with this film and Ellis, and then we'll get into the music after that.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you so much for having us. So excited
Absolutely.
to be here with you guys. The team from the Mondo folks you guys hope having a great symposium, and also the Guild of Music Supervisors. We're so thrilled to be here and do this film festival, kick it off. Let's go. I'm very excited about this film too, Mr. Soul. It's really an amazing story that I'm so happy to bring to the folks now, and especially people who are into music and really appreciate the journey of our music in this country and just this extraordinary soundtrack that we've had all this time, and to really think about where it started on television and the visibility of artists. It's just really exciting. So Soul was actually a television show that was, if you haven't seen this show yet, I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that it was a really important, groundbreaking PBS television show that aired on PBS
Yes.
from 1968 to 1973, and it was broadcast right out of New York City from the flagship PBS station, which is WNET Channel 13. And it broadcast across the nation, nationwide, for 5 years. And it was really extraordinary in terms of breaking real ground and bringing the visibility of artists that people may have heard records or heard on the radio or seen on the Chitlet circuit or seen up at the Apollo, but the actual opportunity to have artists performing in your living room on television was completely revolutionary.
Well, not just artists. I mean, obviously, the Black culture was so well represented in this show.
Yes, and so it was not just about music, but I only said that up first because of what we're doing here today, but
Sure.
It really was not only was it a vehicle for African-American artistry, but it was a platform for political expression and the fight for social justice, all sort of like a intersection of culture and politics and art and activism and beauty and love, Black strength, Black sister and brotherhood, and this sort of expansive idea of culture for the first time, sort of post-civil rights, on the heels of civil rights, and the women's movement was happening. It was a very tumultuous time for the nation.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, obviously, Ellis was a unique individual in the sense that he was not a mainstream guy. And he was a very arty guy, and he had a lot of interesting likes and dislikes, and, obviously putting people like, from the Black Panther Party and people like that on got a lot of attention on him, both positive and negative. And I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody because it is a great piece of the movie, but talk about the political nature of what happened in a way without giving it away, if you wouldn't mind, because I think it's fascinating.
It is really fascinating. It's hard because if you're thinking about how we are now, what's happening in the world now, and of course how media and politics are intertwined, how we get our news, et cetera. Well, we have to sort of jump back about a little over 50 years and realize that public television was really the first space for this public forum that was, pre-FCC. There was no 7-second delay. There were no restrictions on programming and liberal expression in the media. However, that was also the time of Nixon, whose administration was really not fond of public media and that public discourse, especially liberal discourse in the media. So to have a show that was unapologetically Black, that was radical, that was in your face, that was undiluted, you know, pushing forward this really progressive agenda, that was pretty controversial. And it's exciting to think that artists could be themselves, though, and that they could, you know, on the one hand, perform like full on sets for a whole hour without commercial interruption, but without any kind of agenda. You know, they weren't necessarily plugging something the way they do now, but to have this space for, you know, originality and freedom of expression and freedom to just be themselves as artists is really interesting to see the interplay and how politics was pushing back on the show because eventually the cancellation which happened, but how artists were responding in time and how artists respond in culture in that way and how they move the culture forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe to say probably the first time anybody saw a poetry slam, you know, an African American poet slam on national TV, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the last
interpretive, you know, everything from interpretive dance to Black Panthers to Stevie Wonder to Al Green. I mean, the gamut, name it. So talk about your relationship with how did you get involved with this project?
Yeah, well, my relationship is pretty simple in that Ellis Haizlip is actually my uncle. And I was in love with him as a kid. You know, I just was so inspired by him. I couldn't figure out who all these magical people were around him until I got older and realized that they were the artists from soul and the, you know, the movers and shakers in the cultural landscape. But I've always wanted to make this film because I knew that we had this amazing show. And for those who hadn't heard of it, it's like the greatest show you've never heard of. But for those of us who have that lived experience and understand, you know, that somebody paved the way for so many of the artists on television and the hosts and the late night hosts that we have now, that it was really important to tell this story and to really showcase not only these gorgeous performances and kind of a time capsule, but to also remind ourselves of our greatness, and especially in these dark times, to have something that is so positive, so uplifting. You know, it was really exciting to.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film, and obviously, you know, when you get turned on to, you know, artists that you see, you know, they've been stars for the last 40 years, right? But
Yeah.
this show puts some of these artists for the first time ever on TV and on
That is
national
wild.
Yeah.
The idea that you're seeing Earth, Wind, and Fire for the first time is just hard to fathom, you know, or Al Green for the first time, or Nikki Giovanni performing poetry with a choir for the first time,
Yeah.
or even a group like Ashford and Simpson or The Last Poets, or,
Right.
you know, but also seeing artists interviewing other artists, you know, seeing Nikki Giovanni talk to James Baldwin in London and have a really amazing conversation, these sort of the interiority of Blackness, which is not something you would see necessarily or hadn't been, you know, elevated to that kind of discussion or visibility.
And how did Ellis end up in this position of incredible cultural power to be able to have that job and book these people?
Yeah, he had always been kind of on the cutting edge of the theater world, of the Black arts world, and he started really early. He went to Howard University, and then coming out of Howard, he was really interested in Black theater. And so as early as like 1965, he actually toured the very first international company of the Amen Corner, which is a James Baldwin play, and took that to Europe. But he also like worked with Brian Epstein as a silent partner. Yes, Brian of the Beatles.
Is that right?
Yeah, they collaborated on a show that was called Black New World, which was a modern dance show by Donald McKayle. And so that was, you know, going through Scandinavia on a tour. And he actually met up with Jimi Hendrix and hung out with him in Scandinavia. So he was always moving and shaking, and, you know, he knew what the artists were doing and was just trying to figure out a way to put a platform together so that he could mix it all together, you know, the high and the low, the sacred, the profane, the famous, the not famous. It was all meaningful because it was all Black culture. You know, he didn't really discriminate.
Yeah, Ed and I have a big connection to New Orleans, and it reminds me of like a gumbo, what he put together in this show. He just built this incredible different gumbo of, you know, these spoken word poets and this incredible music and interpretive dance. And you're like, I can just imagine if you're a white guy in Ohio, you turn that show on, you're like, what's happening here in 1968? Come on. So obviously this thing doesn't exist without being able to get all this amazing music. And Ed and I have kind of walked, because we've been friends for a long time, talking about this for the last year. And so and talk about the process of clearing some of these masters, and who the masters in publishing, who own these masters. Did and then there's a rights issue of like, does the actual artist own them? Does the label who they recorded for, does PBS own them? Ed, talk about walking through that crazy process.
Yeah, well, thanks. And it was such an honor to work on this film, by the way, and to work with Melissa, really. I mean, I think as music supervisors, there's very few projects and things that we do that we can actually feel really, really, really honored that we were a part of, and this is one of them. So thank you. We had a great clearance person, by the way, Kathy Carpella at Global Image Works, by the way. It's fantastic. And, we knew it was going to be a challenge, from the get-go. I mean, throughout the various cuts that we had, it became pretty obvious that it was 60, 70, 80 clearance things that we were going to do. Obviously, Melissa had a deal with NET, that had the footage rights, and which included those performances because everybody had signed off on them,
So the masters, in a way, are owned by.
Well, the live performance footage is the masters. Yeah, correct. But then we obviously had to go to the publishers and the rights holders on the publishing side, and that was it was easy and it was difficult. I mean, you knew it was going to be difficult from the get-go, but it became easy when people actually, when you told them about it and you told them about being on your performance on Soul, they all were like, oh yeah, absolutely. You kidding me? And they invested in that pretty quickly. There were, I mean, when you're dealing with Stevie Wonders of life, and we have a beautiful version of Patti LaBelle singing Over the Rainbow, which happens to be one of the hardest things to clear in the world. They were difficult in the sense that they took a really, really long time because obviously it was a doc. We had
question for you. Did you do an MFN type of clearance, or how did you?
We had to do an MFN. I mean,
in other words, if you weren't going to play ball in the MFN, you had to be out of the movie.
Yeah. But right? By the way, there was not one person, I think, and a lot of this goes to Melissa. Can be very tenacious. And it's how you get things done, obviously. But believe it or not, through all those difficult times, and clearing Stevie Wonder and somebody like Over the Rainbow took 2 years. 2 years worth of.
And what was the final tipping point to get both of those clearances done?
I think that, I hate to say this because I'm going to get hung on this, but you know what? I've been doing it for a long time. I don't care. we put, Melissa took this film to film festivals. We didn't have all those things cleared, but we went out anyway and did it. So I don't recommend that.
They were in motion. To be fair, they were in motion.
They were in motion. Yeah. They were in motion. But we did, and I think that in a way, the reaction that the film got, we won the IDA for Best Music Doc 2 years ago. Right. Which is like the Academy Awards of docs. And the work that Melissa did in taking it to these film festivals really established how important this film was, And
so you used a lot of the press coming back to the clearance people.
Correct.
To show that this was not just an average film. This thing was way above average. And not only that, especially in today's world of Black culture, how important it is. Well,
the final thing, which was only not that long ago when we were putting this, Melissa was putting this movie up on a platform for distribution, and we had to get all the licenses done. It happened to be, unfortunately, but fortunate for us, in a time when the whole Black Lives Matters, and there was a spotlight on that, and it was important. And this film is so important for that world and so important for people to see just for that reason. And yes, we did use it.
Look, you got to use every tool. You got to use every tool in the shed. So,
Yeah.
Melissa, though, were you prepared knowing that the MFN strategy is the way a lot of these docs, we have to clear the music? As a filmmaker, you have your favorite spots in there that you don't want to lose. But, in the MFN world, you have to be prepared to walk. How was that process in dealing with Ed and making it all happen?
Yeah, that was always really important from the get-go. And, I literally met with Kathy, believe it or not, 10 years ago. I said, literally 10 years ago, she was the first person I met with. And I said, okay, here's the vision. Tell me that I'm crazy now, but can you walk me through how difficult this is going to be so I can at least prepare myself? Like, that was the key, to know just how hard it was going to be. And then to plan for every scenario, to plan for blocking rights, to plan for AFM rights as they came up, to plan for everything that was changing in the midst of while we're making the film, because rules started to change, right? And so we had to be ready for that. And we always had to be mindful of worst case scenario and best case scenario. But what we tried to do is create a community around this film, and to let the musicians know that this is not just a one-off. This is not us trying to get over or to exploit anything. We are documenting this journey. We're treating the music like it's a character. This has a role in the film, and it expands and grows and has its own journey from 68 to 73 and beyond. And so to be a part of that, documenting that history and documenting that music, was not just a privilege, but it was a gift, and it was a necessity. Like, we can't leave you out. We can't leave anyone out of this story that we're telling. Not like you need to get with us because we have an MFN, but instead we want to include you in this incredible story of Black music that we're telling, and we can't make it without you. So that was always
that a lot of that has to do with the narrative that you as the director of this film laid that out for people in such a beautiful way. I mean, it's true. And so,
nothing is extraneous. Everything tells the story. So if we're looking at this one clip of one of my favorites, where you have Stevie Wonder is performing live and he's playing You and I, that's not just about him playing You and I. It's also describing the importance of Black choreographers at the time. So you get to bring in a Black choreographer talking about Black dance and the expansiveness of Black dance. Then you get to see dancers from Alvin Ailey as well. And then you're also talking about Ellis Haizlip and his propensity to spot talent and to create opportunities. So you're hitting like 3 story points. There's 3 stories.
So you're using the lyrics as helping you tell story also.
Yeah, lyrics and visuals too. So it's not just, hey, let's all stop and watch Stevie Wonder, but look at this incredible clip and all that it represents at the moment. So everything had to earn its way in and tell the story. And that's why all the songs are chosen so specifically. And then, of course, the score has to pull that all together.
Yeah, that was my next thing. So let's talk about Robert Glasper for a second. Ed, we did a panel together at Mondo a couple of years ago with Ed on the Don Cheadle movie that he won the Grammy for. And Glasper, to me, just blew me away. Like, obviously, talent-wise, I know what he is, but personality-wise and humor-wise, I mean, he's got 5 tool players, they say in baseball. I mean, he's got it all. So talk about your working with him and that whole thing, how it came together.
I think when I first met on the project with Melissa, I think based on Rob's work with the Miles thing, which he did great work, but it was his first time composing for film, and there wasn't a lot of composed film. He wrote a lot of original songs that we used in the movie, but as far as a score, it was 10, 15 minutes worth or so. This was a different project. He was going to have to step it up a little bit. This was for the Miles thing, Miles Davis's music composed most of the score, so Rob just filled in. He was going to have to be a lead character in this film, basically as Ellis's musical muse in a way. And so we had talked about this and brought Rob in. And of course, Rob is an amazing cat, just warm, friendly guy, funny as all get out, but is a spiritual guy too. He comes from the church out of Texas, and And he got this film right away. Right away. It's a soulful film, and so he was all in from the get-go. And so, but it was important that we established that he had to have a score that worked from the beginning through to the end, and it was a character in itself. And then there was a payoff in a entitled song that he wrote, and Layla Hathaway performed. It was fantastic. But what was great about Rob is obviously we had so many licensing things that we had to deal with, that to establish time in the film, we took songs in the temp that would be, from that time frame, whether it was, John Coltrane. I'm riffing, by the way.
Oh, you got it.
Or something, things so that would set up in, okay, well, this is 1968, 69, everything else. But they were, they weren't underscore. They were in the background to establish the time frame. We had to get rid of them because we run out of money, basically. As all these things do, to go. And so this was a great opportunity for a score to kind of, have that same effect, but tricky though, because it's gotta be kind of like you gotta make it sound and feel like it's coming from that era, right? But Rob was the greatest, man. We were in the studio and you go, Rob, we needed Curtis Mayfield, 1971, and boom, he counted out with his group, and he had it, he had it,
right.
And that nailed it. No rehearsal, nothing. And it sounded just like Curtis Mayfield, man. It was great.
That's what the great ones do. They can just interpret.
He was fantastic. And that lifted this film. And then the most important thing was to find Ellis's theme, I thought. And that came, and Melissa was also instrumental in that as well. But it came pretty natural to Rob too, to get it. And then once we heard it, and we go, oh my God, that's it. And you can hear it throughout the movie, by the way. And I think it does a beautiful job of setting it up and a character. So, no, Melissa, man, I can't.
A lot of times people, there was a great quote that just one of our Emmy nominated music supervisors, Liza Richards for The Watchmen, Damon Lindoff, who did The Watchmen, had a quote about music supervisors. And the quote was, music supervisors are like a great librarian. They'll take you to find the book you're looking for, and they'll take you to find a book that you haven't heard of, but you love. And so I kind of love that quote because it's kind of, it sums it all up that, when I tell people, what do people, what's a music supervisor? Like, well, we're kind of like a translator. Like, we have to translate between the composer, director, producer, all those songs you want, what library cues do you want, how do you want to put it all together in that soup and mix it together. So talk about your relationship with music, Melissa, and working with a supervisor and a composer.
Well, it was such a thrill. I come from a musical background. I studied classical piano since when I was 4 years old. I went to Interlochen. I was obsessed. I wanted to be a concert pianist. But I also grew up imbibed with music everywhere, all the time, 24/7, everything, classical, jazz, everybody. That was my life. So I'm so familiar with all the music from my youth and everything even before, from my parents, from the 40s and 50s and stuff. So I had a really amazing grasp of the story that we were telling and how to tell that in music. And I actually scored the whole film, and with the temp score of all the favorite songs that I wanted that were absolutely perfect for the time period and the transitions and, who was playing what at what time. And so when I handed that to Ed, he said, whew, that's ambitious.
It's a big job, yeah.
Remember that, Ed?
Yeah, I do. Oh, I do.
But I was excited because I knew he had my back. And so really that was just to illustrate what the film was going to do and the type of story it was going to tell and where the music was going to take the foreground or the background or lift it up, how we would define the story with just a drop of a needle drop or something like that. And to try to decide what songs had to be sourced and what songs were already going to be set because they're part of the performances in the Soul series. And then, of course, what will our composer bring? So that was a real game of Tetris, because we wanted to honor certain songs that you had to have that were like the soundtrack of our lives at those moments. But then we were, as Ed so aptly put, like we needed these certain themes to happen throughout the film. We needed Ellis to have a theme. We also needed our villain to have a theme. In this case, it's Nixon. Mm-hmm. And so I remember saying to Ed and saying to Rob, I don't know how to describe it, but you know how Jaws had this theme, and every time the shark was coming, you knew? I needed to have that.
Oh, Nixon as a villain. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And I'm like, it's like a combination of Jaws and Nixon. Let's call it Jixon, and everyone laughed at me. But it was the Jixon theme. And it worked. Because
now it's good because I go back and watch again, and I'll think about
pick up on that.
The first time you watch, I just try to watch the movie as a movie, and then I go back again and watch the music to see how it all works.
Exactly. And so with Rob was incredible. From the first time we met, we hit it off. I had already been a huge fan, Black Radio 3 and everything. And, he's so funny. He's just beyond ridiculous. I follow his IG page. And so I was so excited to work with him. And here's a funny story that the first time he came to do the spotting session to see what the film was going to be like, I was really nervous. Oh, here comes Robert, and he's famous. And it was really exciting. And within like less than 10 minutes, he bolts out of the room where we were all sitting around for the spotting session with his phone. And I'm thinking, oh man, this guy's too famous. He probably is getting a million calls.
It's too big time for us. Kanye's on line 2. Common's on line 1.
Yeah, exactly.
It's never going to work. So I'm feeling nervous. I have all the cookies spread out. Ed, remember, I got
that's right, you did.
Trying to make everybody happy. So I go out. He didn't come back for a while, and I go out into the hallway, and he's on the phone, but he's singing.
Yeah, he's like humming into his phone, man.
He's singing into the phone. And I went to check on him to see if he wanted us to pause the movie, and he was like, I was so inspired. I've already started composing it.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful.
And I was like, whoa. He was
now
literally singing into the phone. The song that he was hearing.
As someone that comes from a musical background and that's related to the subject, and you've been thinking about this movie for 10 years, how long have you actively been producing it?
Yeah, 10 years. Well, we actually, no, I'll say 11, because we shot the first interview in November 2009. That's
incredible. So for you as a musical person and that kind of time spent and that kind of history of telling your uncle's story, why documentaries are amazing, because you can tell these great stories. Like I grew up in New York City, okay? Yeah. I watched NET my whole life, but I never, ever heard of that show because I was 9, 10, 11 years old. And that shit wasn't on my radar. It was like Wonderama, and then it was, whatever.
Yeah,
but so the ability that to be able to see Rob composing live on the spot to your movie, tell me about that feeling.
I knew right away. I was like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. I come from a very musical family. My cousin is actually in the film too, and that's Billy Taylor. So, I grew up going to Jazzmobile and understanding this magnitude of our music, Black music, everybody's music. It was all part of my life. And I write music. I've also worked with a couple of composers before and done a couple of soundtracks as a singer. So I knew that I wanted to have a creative input, but I wanted to hand this film over to somebody that I knew understood the story we were telling, was in love with that story, and knew that music instantly. So if I said, Rob G, we need this piece where, it's like Sunday slow drive to church in a slow tempo, what you got? And he's like, got it, and we went in, he's like, here, take the tambourine. So I got the tambourine out, and we just nailed it in one take, because it was this almost like this communion that was happening, that we Ed and the team and everybody at Red Bull, shout out to our friends at Red Bull Studios,
Red Bull. Yeah,
helped us create this extraordinary environment for 2 days where everybody was just jamming and vibing. And we had, the film was up on like eight or 10 screens, and we were literally composing and recording to tape. We were watching the film, and I was saying, okay, this is the moment where, and can we have a key change here? And can we're going to call this the new day. And
Sure.
explaining and literally telling them, and at this moment, I need more drums, I need more cacophony, I need more danger. So I was just as much a part of that.
Yeah, no, Ed, how much of a pleasure is to work with a director that really knows and loves music? Because that doesn't always happen for us.
No, not at all. It was great. Melissa had a really good sense, what she wanted and what she wanted to hear. I mean, my gig at that point is to be more like a straw boss. I had to keep it organized and keep it moving because we're on time and money at that point. And Melissa was putting on the musician hat, which is like, yeah, let me hang out, that's some fun. I'm like, no, we're spending money. You can't do that.
You've been waiting 10 years for that moment, dude.
I've been waiting. You kidding me, man? To shut down the director was great. Like, come on, you can't do that. No, but she had a great sense of what she wanted, and was the in charge, and so. It was a very creative time, the couple of days. Rob, that's the other thing about Rob. He's got the greatest musicians that work with him.
Oh, yeah. Top shelf.
Anu.
Shout out to Muhammad.
Yeah, Muhammad. Yeah, Muhammad and Anu. And they were all fantastic
Marcus
players,
Machado,
man. Yeah, they just, his sensibility. And that was the other thing about Rob. He'll pick up the phone and call anybody. You know what I mean? Like, you got to get down here and do this, and he has such a wide spread of his own thing, that, and people respect that. So we were in good hands. I mean, because, this is a doc, we're not dealing with a lot of money here, it's just the reality of things.
Yeah,
so
speaking of that,
people do it for the love.
Yeah, how did you raise your money? Where were your funding sources coming from to start?
That's what was really unique about the film too, is that because we kind of wanted it to match the provenance of the original show, which was on PBS and was funded by like the Ford Foundation and several other nonprofit foundations. And we thought, well, this is for the people, by the people. We need it to be the same. So the entire film was funded by grants.
So you did some grant writing?
I did all the grant writing. And
wow, that's some serious business. I know my daughter's in the nonprofit sector, so I know what that looks like. That's a serious business. Yeah.
But we wanted to situate the film in that reality too, to say, yes, this can be blessed by, endorsed by, supported by the National Endowment for the Arts, because it was publicly funded and it was publicly telling the story of the nation. And it also, happened on the onset of the birth of public television and public broadcasting with the Public Broadcasting Act. And so we wanted to make sure that the film, was informed by all of that. So we had money, raised money from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Ford Foundation, and many others. And recently we got a grant from Ken Burns in the Library of Congress, the very first award that they gave out last year. And so we just wanted to situate it in that sort of public television, public broadcast reality, and to give back to that. It was really important to maintain that pedigree. We weren't suddenly trying to, create something that was going to be a blockbuster, but we wanted it to be like, this is the evolution of soul.
Yeah, no, it's great. And you really nailed it. And speaking of that, a question for both of you. What to you is your favorite melt you musical moment in the film, performance-wise, I should say?
Well,
Ed, you want to go first? Ed, you can go. Ed, you want to go first?
Let me go first. The opening shot of Al Green from his leg up and him singing that's all she wrote.
That was it for you. That's all you need. What else you need?
Listen, what a way to start a movie and start a movement, by the way. It's like, that's me.
Yeah, that guy's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's so hard to choose because it's all so good.
They're all your babies. They're all your babies.
But yeah, and we fell in love with so much. And if anything, the editing was the hardest part because, how do you say, I remember my editor said to me, well, you can't have 2 Al Green songs and 2 Stevie Wonder songs. And I'm like, you're not
Yeah,
asking
you can.
you're not asking me to cut one of them, are you? Because that's not going to happen. Trying to prioritize is really hard. So what we focused on was the story we were telling, and then deciding from what era and what season and what moment could we match up the story with the music, with the clip, and still have that also match what was happening in the zeitgeist of the nation. So it's sort of like 3 different stories we were telling. Storyline A is the story of soul. So you've got all those episodes from 68 to 73. Storyline B is the story of Ellis Haizlip. So you have the biography of the man and the biography of the show. And then the last part, storyline C, for filmmakers out there, that's the zeitgeist. What was happening in the nation that would create an opportunity for soul. So everything that was in the film, it has to answer to that. And you have to collapse those 3 storylines into one and find the most salient moments. And so that's how we made our decision about what would end up in the film. Of course, there were things that didn't get in there, like this incredible clip of Curtis Mayfield, just still dying over that. But,
that was one that got away for you, huh?
Yeah, well, it really is for Melissa, by the way, and the fact that she did it all with grants and everything else, she had nobody told her what, in all respect, it was your film. You did whatever you wanted to do, and it was your cut. No suits were there banging on her head.
What happens
and that's why this movie is
grants and raise your own money.
But that's why this movie is as powerful and as great as it is, because nobody told her what to do. She did it herself.
Yeah, and there's a truth in there. There's a beauty in there, and there's definitely love in there. And we wanted that to come across.
Well, you could feel that as a family. You could feel that for me, family, because being Black and gay at that point was not exactly a major thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it existed obviously, but it wasn't as you could feel his gayness. He was out there, and so he was a true maverick. You know what I mean? And in many different ways, and the programming he put on, he didn't, much like you made your own film. He made his own show. He didn't kowtow to people. He's like, I'm going to have a panther on. I'm going to have a panther on. You know what I mean? I'm going to do interpretive dance for 10 minutes. I'm going to do it. And so that shows really well. I think you did a beautiful job on that. And also the lineage of family. It's kind of a blessing that what it takes to get things done is insane. And you have to be kind of crazy like you to do what you did, to spend all that time and energy and write all those grants but it lives forever, and that's the beautiful thing. And most people don't know that show. Like I said, for me, growing up in New York, never knew about it, but now I did. So, it's really an amazing feat that you guys put together. And, we'll keep promoting the next couple of days and get people to watch this film. I've been raving about it for a long time. What is the distribution for future of it?
Yeah, so we decided to bring it out during this moment when everybody was at home, because we thought, wow, this film is finished. It's uplifting. It's positive. It's encouraging. Why not bring it out now? And we created this kind of a new model, this virtual cinema release. We weren't sure how it was going to go, but we thought, if we could partner with some independent cinemas, art house cinemas, film organizations, museums, cultural institutions, everybody's doors are shuttered. So why not partner with them and support them at the same time? So that's what I love about our virtual release that we have happening right now. We've actually partnered with, it started out as 3, then it became 60, and then suddenly we had 90 cinema partners across the nation, which would be impossible to do, if not for the situation we're in. But it was our way of also giving back, so that you could feel good about knowing that half your purchase price was going to your favorite cinema, maybe Laemmle's Cinema in LA, or, Maisel's up in Harlem, or, any number of Alamo Draft.
Great idea. And then it'll run on PBS at a certain point?
Yeah. So
when does it hit PBS?
Yeah, it's going to hit PBS during Black History Month. And we haven't announced that publicly, but
January, February? February, right.
Yeah. So we're going to be announcing that real soon. So that's going to be another version of the film. It has to be a little bit shorter because we have only an hour. We only have 83 minutes. So we'll have this other PBS version that will come out, and we're really excited about that too.
And we're very honored to be in Variety's shortlisted picks for Oscar contenders for Best Documentary. They came out this week, so knock on wood, and we're very excited about that.
It's just exciting because if you look at that list, it's like the best films that have come out, but you see all of them, and then you see ours, which is our own distribution. So it's kind of cool. We're just really excited that we were able to bring it to the people, and we're creating community as well. We're apart, but we can be together, and the idea that you can't cancel music, you can't cancel art. Maybe you cancel 2020, but it was just really important to bring us all together at a time when it really feels like the nation is torn apart. And I believe music can do that, film can do that, and culture can do that. And
well, like I said, why we love, Ed and I love what we do is being able to work with people. I did a movie a couple of years ago called Blind Spotting.
I love that movie.
It's an amazing film, and now we're starting today on the TV show that Lionsgate and Stars are doing. But it's, to me, being on Obama's top 10 list was like, they put Lionsgate put it out against Mission Impossible, but like all of a sudden Obama a year later says, I love the movie, and everybody's like, oh shit, I should watch this movie, which is really what it's about. It's about endorsements from the right people, spreading the word about your film. And I think that your film, getting to the right tastemakers and people shouting it out. But it's hand-to-hand combat. I know promotion, my movie screening, we're doing a Q&A tomorrow night for my movie, and that's coming out in February too. And it's a hard thing to do, to make these movies and get them out in the world. It's like, as 10, 11 years it took you to make it, it's that much harder to market it and get people to see it. It's bananas what it takes. So
and everything has changed, and so we decided we can be flexible, we can be nimble, everything, the models are changing. And ironically, because we're all at home and there's a certain uncertainty with our future and what's going to happen, of course, in the course of the awards run, and just in general, how we're going to move forward in sort of a post coronavirus world. It's still okay to sort of take that moment and that opening and say, here's a gift though. Here's something that's wonderful that we can all feel good about. And so because there's that honesty behind it, and because it is just this pure gold of archival, it's like a love letter to Black culture, but it's also a love letter to music, and it's like a love letter to,
your family too.
Yeah.
So was he related to your dad or your mom?
My dad.
Okay. And were they close? What was their relationship?
Very, very close. Yeah. Very, very close. So it's just really exciting. And I'm excited that we've been able to sort of adapt to what's happening and, push this out there in the virtual cinema, because that's basically where we're moving forward. Like, we weren't even really sure what was going to happen in August, but because everybody's logging on and everything's about Zoom and being in chat spaces. And we did a screening the other night on OV, which is like a PBS platform, and everybody was chatting in the chat. Like, it felt like the same vibe that you get in the theater, up the Apollo, where people are talking back at the screen or something. So this might be the new way. This might be the way.
Yeah, well, right now it is the new way.
It's the only way. It's the only way right now.
But it's great that the content keeps coming, and people like you go all in. I mean, your spirit, your vibe, I could just feel it through the computer. And Ed's been raving about you for a long time, so I'm glad we really had a chance to meet and spend this time together. And we at the Guild will be continuing to spread the word about your film. And like I said, we'll send this recording out to all the people that saw it, so they get a chance to do it, to watch this and experience it.
Thank you so much. And if you, by any chance, if you happen to miss this particular window of streaming, it is streaming from our website. So you can just go to www.mrsoulmovie.com and click on the screenings tab. And then you'll find a list of all the theaters, like 60 screening partners, maybe your favorite, movie cinema house down the street. That's
really a great idea. So you can decide on who to support, like locally.
Yeah.
You're right. Lemley's. Yeah, Lemley's out here is like where I go see my independent movies. So you got to support.
Exactly. So it feels like, hey, their doors are closed. Let me support them. And that's a different model, because there's no middleman. There's no distributor. It's like you can support the theater you love, and you can support independent cinema and
That's great.
independent filmmakers.
Yeah, I want to chat more about you with that in the future, because I think it's an important model. I'd like to know more about how you put that together. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. So Ed, thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you,
Sammy, Levi, Angela at the Guild, thank you guys so much for setting this link up. And
thank you guys.
Much love, much love.
Well, thank you so much. All right.
Thanks so much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.